So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Empowering 21st Century Learners Through Biodiversity Knowledge, Resources for Online Learning. My name is Diane Bosacek. I'm the Membership Manager for the American Institute of Biological Sciences. If you're not familiar with AIBS, we are a national scientific organization dedicated to advancing biology for the benefit of science and society. We work to ensure that the public, legislators, funders, and the community of biologists have access to and use information that will guide them in making informed decisions about matters that require biological knowledge. One way we do this is by providing decision makers information, and we do this independently and in partnership with our organizational members and business partners. So before we start today, I'm going to go over a little bit of housekeeping. A quick little reminder, this meeting is being recorded for archival purposes. If you have any issues, please use the chat feature and someone from AIBS will assist you. There is a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So to ask a question, please type in your question into the Q&A feature on the bottom of the Zoom screen. And someone from actually, Anna will go ahead and answer those questions as they are submitted. So I'm now actually going to go ahead and hand this over to our presenter, Dr. Anna Monfils. She's a professor of biology at the Central Michigan University.
Right, thank you very much. I'm going to give a little bit of background about myself so you kind of know where I'm coming from, and then hopefully my goal is to sort of point out some educational initiatives that are coming down the pike, as well as dealing with the very real issue a lot of us we're having as professors, which is how do we get our stuff online and what are some quick and easy ways to do that. So I am the PI on a grant, BLUE, Biodiversity Literacy and Undergraduate Education, which is about really thinking about the data science needs of the biodiversity community, identifying what core skills would be within that community, and then developing the materials to help get those into the undergraduate biology curriculum. And the area that we focus in is sort of the introductory biology component of it. But when I talk today, I'm going to talk about issues that are coming from other groups and other initiatives a little bit as well. My background is I'm a plant systematist. I run an herbarium, and I work a lot in conservation biology. So you'll see that a little bit as we move through. So I don't think any of us would argue we're living in a changing landscape for educating next generation workforce. And we have nothing but the situation we're in right now to understand how much the world has changed, how we have increased technology. The world is mobile, we're global. The connectivity is high, the expectation to be able to connect globally is there. We have a changing world of diversity. We have digital data that's coming online and rapidly and immediately. And we have increasing resource needs, both our natural resources as well as resources even like internet right now, which we're having limitations on. And so as this world is changing, so are the needs that our students will have as they move into the workforce. A great article that came out, or what do we call them when they come out? The study report that came out from the National Academy of Science looks specifically at data and data science. And I take this quote out of that: in future decades, all undergrads will benefit from a fundamental awareness of and competence in data science. And what I notice with my students is how much I need to push that into a lot of the general biology education and make that just some of the foundational tools that they have moving forward come from the ability to deal with data. So I have to give a lot of credit here to Gordon Uno, who showed some of these slides to me recently, really kind of taking home the idea of what employers are looking for in students. And when we look at our students want jobs. Our students are coming to college to get jobs. And so addressing these core skills is becoming critical. Here we're looking at learning outcomes. These are the learning outcomes that at least 4 in 5 employers rate as very important. And you'll see here oral communication, working effectively with others, written communication. And then we also start seeing things like ethics. You have critical and analytical thinking and applying knowledge and skills to the world. I show this to students because these are the skills that we're hearing from the employers they want, which might be a little different from some of the skills they think they have to have. Here it goes through it again with more than half the employers wanting some of these analytical skills, dealing with information, being innovative and creative, technology, numbers and statistics, and analyzing and problem solving. I found this to be incredibly jarring. Again, I show this to students. Employers give college graduates lower scores for preparedness across these learning outcomes than the students actually give themselves. So it means the sense of how well they may be doing in it may not correlate with how well their employers are thinking they are. And when you look at this, you see some pretty sharp discrepancies. Working effectively in teams, something that's really important for students, or students think they do really well on, and then employers are saying maybe not as well. Staying current in technologies, that's actually the closest, the most analogous of the two. Ethical judgment, decision making, you see again those oral, written communication, critical analytical thinking. And again, you're seeing these discrepancies here with problem solving and staying current in science, working with people from different backgrounds. So a lot of these same skills, it's saying employers want it. We're not necessarily training our students the way the employers would like them to. And so this is kind of affecting the way we think about undergraduate biology education and where we need to move it in the future. This is another, I find this fascinating. So this comes from the US Census Bureau. And if I look at students that are going into biological science, where are they ending up? Where are the students that actually get a major in biological sciences ending up in careers? And so if I go over here, you'll see the area with blue is representing the students that actually end up going on to pursue biological careers. And if you look here, I think I would include up here the healthcare component as well. But even if you look at those numbers, what you're seeing is that our students in our classes, we're preparing them for a myriad of other careers and to be citizens who know STEM and have enough knowledge to be able to vote and be part of the public, but they may not necessarily be going into our fields. And from this comes a list of skills. I didn't make this up. And I've seen a lot of graphics for this. You'll understand later why I chose an infographic to represent it. But when we look at skills and what students need, we have learning skills, we have literacy skills, and we have life skills. And we need to be covering all of those bases in undergraduate biology education. So things like critical thinking, like creativity. Collaboration is critical in thinking about teaching students how to really do that effectively. And then there's communication. And it's communication in an era where communication has rapidly changed. There are sorts of literacy skills that come along with information, with media, with technology, and our students are expected to be able to not only know how to do them, but to be able to pick up new ones rapidly. And then this is an area that often gets kind of bypassed, which is, are we teaching our students to be flexible? And I would argue right now, and I say this to my students, we're really practicing that flexibility as we've moved the college environment virtually online. There's also leadership, and what does that look like? And there's initiative. Are students taking initiative? And right now, are they taking the initiative to pursue their own education? They're not sitting in front of a teacher in a live audience. And then there's productivity, there's basic social skills and social awareness. And so all of these are wrapped up into the skills that they're going to need to be successful in their jobs. And my argument is that biological collections, the specimens that are in them, which are tangible and real and place-based, as well as the digital data coming out of these resources and the connection to science and the foundation of science, make biological collections ideally and uniquely poised to teach. The data acumen we want students to have, biodiversity science literacy, we need to understand things like climate change, like pandemics. And these are a great place to work with students on 21st century workforce skills, looking at that whole myriad of skills I just laid out and how we can use natural history collections to sort of connect with students in a meaningful way and sort of transmit new skills and knowledge. So I have to start by backing up to kind of an understanding of what a natural history collection or even a specimen is. So the specimens are the dried specimens, preserved specimens. They can be literally hundreds of years old and even millions of years old. And they go back to this individual specimen that someone cited that there's some information about that's place-based, meaning we know where it came from. It's often dated if it had been living when we caught it. And here we have a butterfly in the center, and I'm actually talking about something that relates to the research project that I do in my lab. So we have these digital specimens. They're going to give us this information, and we can aggregate information from lots of digital specimens. Then we can start thinking about also adding observation. Since this here in this picture is a Pauschig skipperling, which is a federally listed species, we can no longer collect them, but we have historical records, and we combine those with the occurrence records that we have now, giving us a distribution, but a distribution through time, and a distribution over a time where there was a lot of change in land use. So now we're talking about a little bit more data grabbed into that digital specimen data. We can also start looking at specimen traits, linking those back. We have field notes that can start talking about other species that were seen in the field when they were out there. We have field observations, as I mentioned. We have biological samples from both DNA work and stuff done with Wolbachia. And we have species interactions and records of how these butterflies might have interacted with the plants in the ecosystem. We're looking at the timestamp of the changing distribution and linking this to lots of different data layers that are environmental, and overall things with ecosystem health, and looking at different sort of herbicides that have been applied in the fields. So when you get this all together, when we're talking about a specimen or this individual specimen, what we're really talking about is this data that is networked and interrelated, and that can be mined to ask a myriad of different questions. And so that's where, if we're getting into this, we can start to explore how we do science, the process of science, data literacy, technology, and the global nature of our world to look at different questions. So the other reason natural history collections, I love this quote, is nobody ever flunked a science museum. You know, they're inherently interesting. We know we go to them for fun. One of the things that I noticed when everybody went digital all of a sudden was that everybody was pushing around all these museum resources, and it wasn't just the people I interact with all the time who we push those around because that's what we do, but it was also everyone else I knew was saying, hey, do you know you can go on a virtual trip to the museum? I'm sending my students here or my kids here. And so you really do see this as it's a natural connection for students. And so there's a little bit of research that's been done in this area, and we know that students working with natural history collections and specimens have an enhanced capacity for mastering threshold concepts. They have better success negotiating difficult content, an increased capacity to make critical conceptual leaps, higher academic performance in science-based courses, more positive attitudes towards careers in science, an increased interest in science, and improved self-confidence and self-efficacy in the sciences. And all of these are critical things when we're looking at creating a STEM literate society. In addition, they help us as teachers. They facilitate active and experiential learning. They allow us to be place-based and have place-based instruction. We can ask the questions relative to the world immediately around us, or the world that's relevant to our students, or culturally relevant to our students. It aligns with learning core content and competencies. So as we think about things like next generation science standards for K through 12, or we think about the advisory document, the AAA Vision and Change document that's just sort of undergraduate biology, or even what's coming out of ecology with the 4DEE ecology framework. What we have with specimens and what we have with collections aligns very well with the learning objectives that they're prioritizing. It also provides an opportunity for students to experience the data life cycle at all levels, going from actually physically collecting a specimen, to that specimen becoming a digital specimen, to that being aggregated with other specimens, to being used by different end users or aggregated with other data sets. And so they generate, they curate, they find, they can evaluate, they can clean, and they can use the data. And so we know that students, when introduced to big data, tend to remove themselves from the science of it. And that they say, oh, this isn't real science when it's big data and we're just grabbing data. And I see that in even new students that come into my lab, that they're waiting to when they're going to start doing the science. And we're like, well, you are downloading and pulling this data together and doing a data review like you do a literature review. So there's lots of different ways that it provides students a way to understand that. And it can provide a gateway to introduce students to the biodiversity sciences, to data literacy, as this is engaging, and to those 21st century workforce skills. And this is a new one, and it's sort of just happenstance, is it translates really well into an online format. Because this has gone digital, so can the lesson plans and the work that you do relative to them. So as I had mentioned earlier, I am PI on a grant called Biodiversity Literacy in Undergraduate Education, but what is critical to know about this is actually a network. So at this point, it is not me, it is we whenever I'm talking about stuff, because a lot of what I'll introduce or show you is a contribution from my co-PIs on the grant, but as well as the community that has been involved. And so far, I think as of our last report to NSF, we had 350 people who had been involved in our network in the first 2 years. And so our goal is to try to build this to be a little more self-sustaining and to work with other networks and other educational networks to help support some of these similar ideas. So the vision we have is to incorporate biodiversity science and data skills across the core undergraduate curriculum to improve undergraduate biology training and to increase and meet increased workforce demands. The goals, we have 4. One is to have a culturally diverse and inclusive network that includes data scientists and science educators and biodiversity researchers. And really critical to us from the step 1 was to make sure we were bringing the science educators in to keep us honest with what we were doing. And sometimes they can be brought in a little too late in the process. We said they need to be first and foremost. And they need to be helping us as we develop our materials to make sure that we're doing them with the proper attention to the correct learning objectives and learning goals. The next thing was to say, if we're going to say they need these skills, we need to do a good job defining them. And I've had this issue with some other recommendations that may have come down the pike, is that they can be interpreted very loosely, very differently. What we wanted to do is make sure, let's ask the community, what are those data literacy skills that we want to see in our students? Then the idea was to develop the materials that align with those skills. So we're not just saying, hey, community, you all need to teach this, but by the way, good luck finding materials on how to do it. And so critical to that was including assessment. We weren't just going to make them and put them out there, but we were going to make them, we were going to assess them to show that they were getting the learning gains that we were hoping they would, and aligning those with current and existing curricula, and then going through the process of helping with implementation. And I think one of the things that makes our grant the most valuable is that a big part of it is the implementation phase. How are we helping instructors get this information into the classroom? And then the idea is to even move bigger, move beyond the biology curriculum and start thinking about how we can integrate across the curriculum for an undergraduate in general. So since we started, we've been working on this idea of defining the biodiversity literacy and core competencies associated with data. We've gone to several different meetings. These are just a few where we brought drafts of surveys, where we had big discussions and open discussions and listening sessions to try to determine what the goals were or what these literacy and core competencies might be. Our preliminary results, it's still an open survey, so if you go to our biodiversity literacy website, you'll see the survey listed. You can still take it, where we've had quite a few more responses since this time, but a preliminary review shows about half our respondents actually already are using biodiversity data in the classroom. And then in a very preliminary way, what is it they need? Well, they need the educational materials, they need the data sets that are cleaned and ready to go, or that are going to give the appropriate signals for learning for the students, and training. And training was a big aspect of it, because it's not just training them in using the tools, but training them in using the tools to teach students. And what are the biggest impediments? Content and skills. And so the content of what it is we're going to teach our students, as well as the skill sets to feel comfortable bringing those into the classroom. So one of the things I wanted to ask, because part of this is we've got to convince our colleagues that this is in fact valuable to do, and ran the risk of finding out it could not be, but was to ask them, will these skills help our students advance the next level in their career? Is this something we should be teaching them? And what we got was 75% agreement from these 336 responses to the statement, I'm more likely to accept a graduate student in the lab if they have biodiversity data literacy skills. And so this is starting to say, I need to make sure my undergrads are experiencing this, because it will give them the leg up in applying to grad programs. So we had this set up as 7 core skills, and then within there were sub-skills. The kind of 4 that came out with 4.25 out of 5 or higher on all of these are here, and they're darker. And again, there were sub-skills that were highlighted, not highlighted, may have been even better than these in terms of what people thought would be a priority. But what comes through with this is that students need to be able to find and identify biodiversity data sets that would be appropriate to their research question. Then they need to know how to access them, just generally how to get into them to look at the data to see if it's valuable. And then critically evaluate information derived from those types of websites. And then one that came through, and actually our highest, was practice ethical data gathering and usage. So these are the ones that our community is saying, bar none, those need to be in all of our students coming through a biology degree. So the next step that we had with this was, and we've kind of been doing these as we move along together, is to say, well, can we create the materials that help reinforce these skills or help teach these skills? And So we've been working on those. As most all of, I think, the modules that we have here have been implemented. Some have been implemented with over 700 students by this time. So they've been refined over multiple iterations. They have all been assessed to varying degrees. And these are the modules that we have. Now I think we now have almost 20 blue resources that you can access. I'm giving you 2 entry points here because one is our website where we link to everything, and one is the CUBES Hub. And I'll give you in a minute some of the advantages of using the CUBES Hub, but we post all of our materials as open education resources. We also deliberately post them in a way where they're Word documents so that they're editable. The goal is to give credit to the person who put the effort in, so they get a DOI, they get a citation, but it's also to give it in a way and give it out in a way that anyone can feel free to adapt it for their classroom in the way that they would need. So here is one of those open education resources, and we just modified it to put it online. I think I posted it yesterday. There's pictures in front of some of the stuff, but it's either yesterday or Sunday I did this. We have had it up, and if you see here it's at least my left of the screen, this was actually created because a group of students wanted to be involved in educational training. So we developed a little mentoring network for them, and these grad students are brilliant. And they came up with some of the coolest exercises. And so we made sure we brought them through. We got our IRB approval. We sort of mentored them through the process. They created a whole 3-hour lab experience. And this one here was done by a PhD student in his 2nd year, and he was particularly interested in the concept of flight. So when it was all done, we set it up here online. It's been hit a fair number of times. And then we just switched it so the entirety of it is online. So what this does, and I'll give you, this is Blake. He'll hate it that I'm doing this, but in the upper left-hand corner, that's Blake teaching the class. And in this, students look at the physics of flight. They look at things like biomimicry. They look at adaptations that make powered flight possible. They look at the evolution of powered flight, invertebrates and invertebrates. And this is an example of how we aren't increasing core content. These are the same things that you're going to teach in a form and function or a physiology class or even in a physics class. So it's the same content, but what's different about it is this part down at the bottom. The students gain skills using citizen science derived resources. So we have them going to eBird, we have them working with some of that citizen science data, and then reflecting on the value of citizen science. We also have them go to an open data resource in Data Dryad, I think is where we got this one from. I'll have to double check. But they were able to look at and on their own determine the relationship between body mass, wing morphology, and migration distance. And so they took the data from a paper, they were given the problem, and then they had to analyze the data to sort of reinforce and answer some questions about this relationship. And you can see here, they get to design their own model airplanes so that they can figure out the best way they could fly. They look at lift and drag with different shapes of butterfly wings. They build they go ahead and build you'll have to excuse me, it looks like my computer's dying. That's handy. So the next one here that you see is one on data visualization. I have to give credit to this graphic here to iDigBio, and this is an exercise that I just popped up online. It comes with a video. You watch the video, it's a short little exercise. I put this up here to show you a couple of different things. One, you can see that if you look at the one to the left with the crazy fish picture, you'll see some data there at the very bottom. This I put up yesterday, and when I pulled this down, there had been 43 people to view it. There had been 5 people to download it. So that's some quantifiable information that I can produce in terms of products. If you look to the stuff to the right, that shows you what you pull up if you click on it. And one of the critical things about this is that you have instructor materials that are masked. One of the things I noticed using online available tools is that my students have figured that out. And so if someone's provided the answer key, then my students will find it. And that suddenly makes that exercise not all that useful for me. So we wanted to keep that masked. You have to get special permissions. We basically have to be able to tell that you're actually a professor out there. And we also provide, as you'll see here, all of the materials in a form that it's editable and encourage you to do so. At the very bottom, you can see there that we have a citation. So that's what I can go ahead and put in my materials or in my RTP materials to show product. And as you look through, it gives you a basic idea of what it is. And what is really kind of cool about this is, say you go in, you find a module, say you go and use this module, but you want to change the exercise that goes along with it. Then you pretty much use it. You can make an adaptation. You can post the adaptation, which might really help the people coming after you. You get your own DOI associated with it. And so it's a way of applying the credit to the professors doing the work, but also freeing it up so that people can really use it. And that was a critical thing for me. The other aspect is what's in those instructor materials. Well, that might be the key, but they're also going to be things like PowerPoints. There's going to be instructions we give or tell people how the program went or how it was to utilize that resource. And so the goal is to create resources that anyone could apply. Here's another one. So we've been working on a course-based undergraduate research experience, and then my class became completely virtual. So I'm now mentoring students through this process all online. But what's neat about this is we've got these amazing data sets that are coming out of the biodiversity community. Data sets I don't even know about. And this allows students to pick their own research question. It can be anything. And as long as it's based somewhat in science, as long as it's using data with fidelity, as long as there's data visualizations, we have a lot of checkpoints in this exercise because we don't want to give students a big unknown, here, just get to this point. We have these steps along the process, and that's all loaded up, and you can see what those steps are along the process. And we first initiated this and have implemented this. What you see here comes from students in a 200 level form and function class. So what I think is kind of cool about it is they could come up with their own questions. So one of them really started to dig deep into the amount of money spent in the Great Lakes on Asian carp. And she was finding data sources. I don't know how she was getting into them. What you see here is maybe a fifth or a sixth of the whole infographic. It goes much longer, but I had to make them big enough to read. And so, I mean, you can just see some of the creativity there where she made a pie chart out of a little fat fish. It's adorable. But they also have all these little fun facts. They're checking in all the way along. They're learning about new digital data resources, and then they have to analyze those and think of an appropriate visual with them. The one in the middle here is someone wanted to look at the biodiversity data sets to figure out where you can take a hike in Michigan and be less likely to run into either a rattlesnake, we have a few of those, or poison ivy or poison sumac. And so they looked all of those up. Now, the conversation that we had to have here was a conversation about, okay, well, you may only have occurrence data. You may only know where something occurs because someone collected a specimen. So that doesn't mean you couldn't go hiking there and find that it had X, Y, or Z that you didn't want around. But it was a great opportunity for them to learn about these data sets and how they could be used appropriately. And the last one here I just get a kick out of because, and I didn't realize until I gave a talk at University of Washington that I am from the middle of Michigan. People turkey hunt around here. When I first talked about getting a big turkey, the people I was talking to at UW assumed I meant which grocery store do you go to get a big turkey? Whereas here in Michigan, people pretty much knew right away, this must be someone trying to find the best place to go hunt a turkey. And so they set it up like a Tinder date, which I had to check into to make sure this was not inappropriate. But they looked at all these different data sources and they found out where the most licenses were purchased in the state. They found out where the highest rate of take was in the state. Then they looked at the sizes of the turkeys relative to the number of hunters in the area. Then one student was particularly interested in looking at toxins that might be in the water to make sure that you didn't go there. And so they've got all of this data that they ended up looking into, and all these ways they visualized the data so that they could identify the biggest tom turkey. And I thought it was kind of a creative way of doing it. But what I like about this is they got to take the question where they wanted, and that they had to investigate the resources, and then that they did, and that they did come up with visualizations that had fidelity to the original data source. Here's another one because I talked about the idea of starting from the gathering data. And there were 6 of us in Boise, Idaho, sitting around talking about digitizing our collections and realized that any students that collect past this date are going to create legacy data. We didn't want that anymore. We didn't want to have to hand transcribe the stuff that was collected. And so we came up with this exercise as a way of sort of integrating emerging issues with iNaturalist and with citizen science with your standard collection, plant collection activity, but immediately made it digital so that students turn everything in a digital way. They utilize some of the more modern resources for a modern herbarium. And then we assess this, and it's my fault totally this hasn't been published yet, since it's in its drafted form and I need to push it through. This website alone has been hit over 53,000 times. And so this is meeting some sort of need. And what I liked about it and liked participating in it is I get to have this community of practice, these group of people you could ask questions to about, oh, okay, when you collect a specimen, and do you do this? Because it says in the book you're supposed to do this. Who really does this? And it was a really frank conversation where I learned a lot more about the topic while simultaneously getting a set of materials that I felt really confident with. This is an upcoming event. I strongly encourage you to reach out to iDigBio.org, and I put the two people here that are leading up this effort. And so this is a big effort, and I even hate to talk about it since it's not my effort, but iDigBio has an annual event each year where all over the globe people are going online and they're taking digitized specimens and they're transcribing the label data. There are a lot of key and important skills that are learned in that process about sort of the value of archiving, about data standards, and about what the data type is and the limitations and the strengths of the data. And so they developed this educational resource that's here for the Liberating Data for Biodiversity Research. This could be a minor, it could be a 2-hour exercise your students do. It could be participating in this upcoming event where people are going back and forth, everyone's digitizing at the same time, there's some games being played, and you feel part of a big global community when you do it. This is something that I just learned about, and it's New York Botanical Gardens Hand Lens. And these are a series of really interesting little vignettes about individual specimens. So you'll see here one's about black botany, the nature of the black experience in botanical science. They show some specimens who they were collected by. They actually have a whole suite of specimens and similar sort of stories that go along with them. But it's sort of a way to kind of connect the natural world with the history. And each one of these is different. You have a cabinet of curiosities, which must be all the weird different stuff that you might find when you're in an herbarium. And then there's things like works of art that you might have. This goes on and on. I mean, there's hundreds of these, I believe. What's nice about them is you could send your students in to ask questions. You could try to link different types of science together, or even the humanities with the sciences. It's a great resource. It's all online. What you do with it, I mean, I think the world's your oyster on that one. And then as I started to try to aggregate some of these resources, I wasn't obviously the first person to think of this. There is actually a place where someone has gone to the ultimate guide to virtual museum resources, e-learning, and online collections. So this is a place that anyone can go and find the materials. And I think this is a great resource that has been put out to the community. I'm sure they update it to some extent, but you can see this just came out. And it really aligns well with the fact that we're all trying to move to this online format. And particularly if you teach a field course, what are you going to do that? So we have all these resources, and we run into sort of the problem I think we've been at with a community that's trying to sort of disseminate this resource. And it's this idea that, this is the field of dreams thing. If you build it, they will come. That if I make the great resource, everyone's going to start using it. And I have to tell you that every single time I go looking, I find more and more fantastic resources, and I'm actually actively looking for them. So it's not actually if you build it, they will come. There's a step there, there's a disconnect. And we know this from the medical community, we know this from other teaching communities, that you may have a resource, you may have been shown a resource or tool or a drug that's really effective, but there's actually a science to getting that now put into sort of the common practice. And you have to think about it that way. And so one of the things our grant did was say, we're going to put in front of everything an assessment of the community needs, and how to best get the community comfortable using the resources. And this also comes back to the idea of a community of practice. And this isn't my idea. This came out of Vision and Change. This is used by other organizations. And it kind of goes back to the way we made that one field exercise and 6 faculty sat around talking about it, is that faculty must engage in regular conversations and peer-to-peer mentoring about teaching, learning, and that this helps them, it helps the teachers, it helps create better materials, and then it needs to be part of our process. And so one of the things that we try to do is facilitate these communities. So we go to various meetings. We went to the Gordon Conference, we go to Data Science with the BioQuest community. We've done a faculty mentoring network on the Cubes Hub. We run a share fair at the Spinach meetings. Well, we've just run into the fact that we may not have meetings this summer, which is very, very different from what we normally have. And so how are we going to get these materials out for the community to use and help the community feel comfortable with it? Well, we also know, and this just came out in the Chronicle of Higher Education, that professors are trying really hard to keep up, but this is a shock to our system. And when I teach, and especially when I teach a full load, there is a lot in front of me to work on. And when I might have 2 or 3 classes, I'm doing the best I can. And then you just told me I had to change every lecture. I have to figure out how to move labs that might be entirely hands-on in the lab experience online. And I can have maybe 24 hours to do the whole switch. And so I'm seeing my community of educators going, oh my God, what do we do? And it's about this time too that you saw a lot of the museums closing. And museums are these fantastic resources, and their colleagues that I work with, and all of a sudden their jobs have stopped. They might be working at home, but to what extent? And it might be the perfect time for us to look and say, how can we in the museum community, how can those expert researchers and scientists help facilitate materials for those teachers that definitely want to do great teaching, but are now stymied by the lack of materials that can let them do that online? I also have to be really clear that I'm not equating truly the science of online learning to what we are trying to do as a community to kind of make do in this time. So out of this came this idea. This has been, and when I say out of this idea has come together in the last 4 or 5 days, is that maybe we can leverage all that expertise in the museum community, all those phenomenal resources, and this community of people that need resources, and find a way to get the resources in the hands with the confidence and kind of ease the load a little bit on the teachers. And so this is our idea on how to do it. This doesn't mean this is fixed in stone. This is where we're coming from. And then you can see that across the top here on the slide are a lot of the partners that are going to be working on this with us. So one is we need to take some customizable lab modules, a lab that would take 2 to 3 hours like a normal lab does. And we need to make sure that there's something that's in a topic that generally a lot of people teach. And we need to put the museum-based scientists on it and build a community of practice so that if an educator wants to use that module, they have a group to come to learn how to facilitate implementation. As an educator, I'm going to talk about myself and assume that there's others who feel this way based on conversations, but I don't have time for this. I do not have time to go through some 6-week process of getting one one-week module out of the way. So we got to help the professors that need something and need it now. And we need to make sure it's valuable and that it's been vetted. But essentially, we need to take a short amount of time to give them an immediate product that they can apply immediately in the classroom and the support that they need to do it. And that is going to help those teachers, because we only do 1 or 2 labs, but we might be able to help them enough to give them a little reprieve during that time. So the model that we're using is the idea that you have 1 week plan for an educator. So if you're interested in doing this, you would say, okay, I want to do the module on human evolution and lice. Really cool story. So what I'm going to do if you join that group is I'm going to give you materials we've used before, all adaptable. Then you're going to get all the supplementary documentation that comes along with those, including keys, including PowerPoints, including instructions to TAs if that's what you have to do. And then I'm going to have office hours to help you modify that module for you to implement. Then when the week comes for the students to actually implement it, and of course we can do this in the same week, so there have to be more than one professor maybe that wants to do it in the same week, is we'll hold your office hours. And we'll get that really charismatic researcher to create a video that introduces the module. We'll put the full module online so your students can go just download it to do it. And we'll hold the office hours so if they have questions, they can come to us to ask. Now you'll feel comfortable, maybe you don't want them to come to us, that's not a requirement, but this could say that week you don't have to worry about this. And we can have, instead, students one-on-one interacting with some of these really cool and charismatic scientists you find in the museum community. So total time for a professor, 1 to 2 hours, depending on the degree to which you want to engage. Outcome is 1 hour to, we can give you a little video to introduce materials. You can give us feedback on what you want to see done different. Then we'll have open hours that week so that you can come and say, okay, well, I wanted this different. Can you help me? I don't understand the answer to this. Or can you guys give me this sort of material that would help me with this? And so that can happen during that office hour time. And only thing you'll have to do then is grade the assignment. I'm not promising to do that for anyone because I hate grading. So you can grade the assignment, but what we'll give you is we will give you all of the answers in a key that's hidden from the students. And then what the hope is that we pick some of our most charismatic educational experiences, ones that we know have gains in content and skills for students. So it's a positive for the students and it's a positive time freement, but it's also good for our community because it's getting our specimens and this research out into the classroom. So if there is an interest in anyone, and now I'm super worried no one will be interested, but if there is, we have 3 modules that are coming up. We're going to have them, each module is a 2-week period of time, because you're going to have that 1 or 2 hours that first week, and then whatever amount of time you want to put in the second, which is the week the students get the material. These are going to be labs, so to speak. So they would cover material commonly put in a lab. And so that first week you watch, this professional get up and explain what this resource is, provide you with all the materials, ask what we can do different or add to it. You may come to office hours and say, did we do it right? Did we do it wrong? And then your students can go watch the video we prepare for you. They can do the module, and all you have to do is grade it, and we'll be there for office hours. So these overlap because we wanted the first one to be delivered to the students April 6th, the second one April 13th, the third one April 20th. Anyone can be involved in any one of those in any capacity they want. All of these are already going to be up online. One is still in development, but the first one's going to be that Nature's Flying Machine, but we have John Bates, who's going to help us with that from the Field Museum, and we're going to bring in some additional bird people to kind of modify it, make it super special, and do sort of the pre-lab sort of discussion about it. The next one is going to be on butterfly phenology and climate change, looking at some data sets. That's going to be led by our own Libby Elwood, who's done some pretty phenomenal stuff. But we're going to pull together a team there that are sort of experts in this area, or particularly charismatic researchers working in this type of stuff. And then we want to look at human evolution and coevolution, and it's called A Tale of 3 Lice. It's going to be Julie Allen that leads off that effort. That's a lot of fun. They did a Colbert Report segment on it, talking about the 3 body type lice that humans have and where those come from and how they've evolved. This is all already pulled together. We're about to load it up as an online resource. Again, anyone can go use it now, but the goal is that we would help in that first implementation, and that Julie has agreed to do sort of an introductory segment and then be available for the students to talk to. So this is where we're coming from. There's other resources out there. You can go to any of these resources I've talked. I would love to see, I explain those open education resources, and one of the things I would like to say is if you're that professor out there that has that great module and you want to bring it into this format, we are happy to work with you to do that, because what we do is really work on helping with that dissemination. So, it's trying times. I am so impressed with how flexible our students have been. I am amazed the way people are reacting to a world that's radically changed. But when I look at this world and this changing world, I'm constantly impressed with what this next generation of students is doing. And so this comes from Bill Gates, and if you give people tools to use their natural ability and curiosity, they'll develop things and surprise you very much and go beyond what you ever would have expected. So I did say this is me reflecting the work of lots of people. There are many people to thank. I have to thank all my graduate students who very nicely let me guinea pig a lot of stuff on them, who've also produced some phenomenal materials themselves that are on the website. I have to thank Barbara Tiers and John Bates, who agreed to kind of get into this with me. Then there's Aim Up, the progenitor of this sort of grant that was first looking at education and bringing museums into the classroom. iDigBio has been super helpful all the way along in this process, as well as iDigBio. You have Cubes and BioQuest that have hosted our materials, all the way down through Collections Web, which started some of this education stuff, Beacon, which has supported several different initiatives that led to us ultimately getting funded. And then, of course, my colleagues on Blue, who co-wrote the grant with me and have been helping in all these different myriads of ways and doing all sorts of awesome stuff on their own. So that's kind of where I'm going to end with it. And hopefully this is what people thought this was going to be.
Thank you so much, Anna. All right, if anybody has any questions, again, please use the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. I'm going to go ahead and stop your sharing, Anna, so you can see the questions. There we go. And we'll give everybody a couple minutes to go ahead and type in any questions they had. And there will be a follow-up email probably tomorrow with a link on how to access the recording of this. We did have some hiccups, and I it is not streaming on YouTube because we hit a little bit of an error. But it will be on YouTube tomorrow, so don't worry. But again, feel free to go ahead and ask any questions now, again, in the Q&A feature.
So Maria Morrow, would the phenology module be appropriate for an intro-level science course expecting no previous experience with data? I think we can make it that way. I think that's what our plan is. I can tell you that a lot of these modules I've put in introductory bio. If what we'll do is we'll help you modify it to be appropriate to the grade level you're talking about. I hope that answers the question. Sam? Oh, how can folks sign up to help out? So that was that button. Oh, okay, so I should have said that, Sam. Thanks. Sam, there's a button there. When you go into it, you will also ask you if you're interested in participating or being part of a group or leading an effort. So you can go there if you either have your own materials, you want to tell us about them, you want to participate in this sort of 3-week effort that we're doing, or you want to, you have some other idea. So there's an open-ended question at the end. So definitely, if there's others that want to help, we're definitely interested in having you. Okay, so someone says, have you thought about implementing the same type of program with high school students? Absolutely, yes. The problem we're running into now is, at least with my kids, is they're not allowed to actually do online learning because not all students have access to those resources. So at this point, there isn't this big gap there. I think down the road it could be, and most of our modules are easily adaptable to whatever level. You know, it could be whether they're going to go find and clean the data themselves versus they're going to get a data set versus they're going to just get the graph that shows what the data set showed. So there's lots of different ways to modify these. Thanks, Adriana. And the other thing is that if that was an interest of yours, we could also help with adapting that. David Clapp. Any interest in developing modules on non-museum topics? We'd have a lot of real-world examples that might be used in undergraduate ecology labs. So what's interesting is you're saying non-museum topics. I'm not sure what you mean by that, because it's a little bit of a party trick, but I don't believe there are non-museum topics. But if you're talking about something like disease ecology, that would be something where there's some really interesting stuff there if you look at things like the hantavirus. If your interest is looking at something that's more molecular based, I can direct you to some groups that are dealing in the area of bioinformatics. We haven't really been, let's just say if it was outside the scope of what we felt we could help with, I think I would know where we could go to help you find the person who could help you with that. The butterfly phonology module can take, God, you know, Libby's on this. Libby, do we remember how long we said that would take? There's parts of it. So everything we've done, this is Laurel Anderson, and we've done this consciously, is we've tried to build them so they're modular. So say you just want to do the first part or the middle part or the end part. You don't have to do the entirety of the experience. Another part of this, and then kind of built out of the work we did, is both Deb Linton and I, who are on the grant, taught a form and function class and put this in most of the labs. And so because the labs are 3 hours, we had 3-hour time periods to fill. Libby's answered, and she says she thinks the butterfly phonology takes about an hour. And I think that's about how I remember it. And Bill asks, is the data set for the lice activity molecular? Could be. So the lice activity has the part that we're going to present, which is just human evolution, looking at the 3 types of lice and coevolution. We actually did a genome diving project where we worked with another, oh gosh, I'm going to gap on the name right now, but I'd be happy to tell you if you emailed me about it. But we worked with another RCN that is funded to do more bioinformatics type of stuff. And so we did a bioinformatics component to that as well. And if that was an interest of yours, we haven't published that yet because it hasn't been refined as much as we would like. But since those things are emerging, we don't put them on until we feel like we can clean them up enough. But I would share that with you, Bill, if you are interested. You just have to email me and say you'd like to look at it. All I would ask is that you give us some feedback back, because we always need that extra bit. So David Clapp, you just gave me your name at the Michigan DNR. And then Martina Donaldson, could these modules, e.g. phonology, Also be adapted for upper level students with some experience with data and allow students to develop their own questions. Martina, yes. And matter of fact, that's what I am doing this semester now virtually. So I just loaded these up. They're the ones that are communicating with data. Students come up with their own research questions. They can use whatever type of data they want. We have a place where our librarian has helped us accrue a lot of data. If you go into the exercise, I'm talking about on the Cubes Hub, or you can get there through the Biodiversity Literacy website, and you go in, you'll see a link. It'll take you to where our librarian, who's an information science person, will go ahead, has pulled a bunch of data sets so students can mine around in there. Now, when I did it related to a Powashik project that I had, which was dealing with this butterfly. So the students could do anything they wanted, but they had to stay within that butterfly conservation world. But when I posted it up online, I took that element out. So now it's more generic. It's any research question that they might have. The other thing is these modules have varying ways they could be applied, whether we have some that are used in our introductory bio. They're just, let's look at the geospatial components of bat distribution versus agave distribution, and then think about how that could affect tequila. So that's pretty easy. You go in, you just hit some buttons, you can see the maps, and you can see where they overlap and don't overlap. By the time you get to some of these other ones, they can be pretty higher order thinking, but that's going to depend on the degree to which you push them in that direction. So Jay Sandal, is it possibly involved in more than one of the 3 modules? How do we sign up? So yes, Jay, and matter of fact, it'd be awesome. But anyone, whether you're interested in a module down the road, whether there's a different topic you want to suggest, whether you want to do all 3, 1, none, or whether you want to help actually run some of them, because we do need help with that. All of that you can do in that one little survey, and if the question isn't asked that you want to answer, then you just go ahead and write that into that extra sort of comment field. And that is up right now if you go to the educational resources portion of the biodiversityliteracy.org website. And so you just go to the educational materials and it'll say extending specimens or extending specimens. So curators in the classroom, that's the whole definition of it. Since this came together this morning with a name, it's a little hard to remember. So Susan Macy and I manage the network of conservation educators and practitioners at the American Museum of Natural History. We have a similar program to Blue and have been around for 20 years and now have 170 different educational modules. That is phenomenal. Although our program was well funded in the beginning, sustainability is an issue and editorial program staffing is quite a challenge. And what are our plans for sustainability? Well, that's always a fun one, isn't it? And NSF certainly likes to hear about that one. I can say that what we've done to try to be sustainable is we built off an existing RCN. We have tried to network with other networks so that we're not delivering material alone without any other outlet. I don't know, because I think that's a really real thing. And so this is, if you guys have those materials, is there a way we can link to them? And is there a way we could sort of leverage that collective interest? One of the ways that we have found more sustainability to our project is the idea that we're pushing a lot of the data science component of it, and that there's kind of a long-standing role there. But I agree, it's always limited by the resources of the people pulling it together. And Kelsey, hello Kelsey. What sort of statistical skills do students need for these modules? It depends. Some of them very, very few. Some of them are going to be just mapping. And other ones could require them to do standard t-tests. Most of the modules are more visual with the data, so you might graph something, then look at the graphs and the trends in the graphs. They might have to have a little bit of background interpreting phylogenetics. When we do that, we make sure to provide the supplemental materials as well, so that depending on where your students might enter into the project. I'm trying to think of the 3 that we put up and what we have in them. So I think phenology was mainly graphing. And then I think we just had like standard t-test type of stuff in the other ones. Means and descriptive statistics. When they get into where they're designing their own projects, it can get more complicated. So the students in mine who've had GIS training are doing a fair amount of stuff with building data layers. Then there's students in my class that got in there and they're freshmen and they're really uncomfortable with that, but they can do the standard stuff in Excel that works for them with the data sets they've chosen. But I do, and I want to make sure, if you are interested in helping us do one of these, please go sign up. If you are interested in helping, want to be part of it, sign up for whichever one you want. And then this is a process and this is a community, so that it's not like we know what we're doing, in the sense that it's not like we're married to this one way. And, you know, we don't know how many people will sign up. And if we have 1 or 2 people, that means we have a lot of individual attention, but it also means we have 1 or 2 more people that are using this data and teaching these skills in their classroom, which is such a win. And then the last thing is to remember that where this is coming from for those of us who are involved is, you know, I'm not a medical doctor. I can't be helping with what's going on right now. And for various reasons, I can't necessarily go volunteer at a food kitchen. But many of us, the museum community especially, is looking at this situation and we're saying, what can we do? One thing we can do is help the teachers that are trying to keep our educational system moving. And maybe this is a way that we can find a little bit of a silver lining and say, let's kind of pull together as a community and find a way we can create better resources, and maybe those will stick around. So thank you everyone for coming. It looks like we're done with questions, but I'm gonna let Diane.
Yes, it's perfect timing. It's 3 minutes before our end time, so it's perfect. So I want to go ahead and thank Anna so much for taking time out of your day to present to everybody. I'd like to also thank everyone for joining today's webinar. You can visit our website at aibs.org, or you can go to our YouTube page, which is AIBS Videos, all one word, to watch recordings of this webinar and actually other videos that we have created in the past. If you're interested in sponsoring a future program like this, you can contact us at membership@aibs.org. We would like to thank the community and all our organizational members for their support. Without them, we would not be able to provide these informative webinars. If your organization is not a member yet, please join us today. And I'd like to thank everyone again, and we look forward to seeing you guys very soon. So thank you everyone for joining, and keep an eye out for that email tomorrow with the link on how to rewatch this video. Thanks everyone, have a great day.
Thanks.